everyone. Happy Thursday. I'm used to this being Mondays, but happy Thursday. Thank you so much for joining me. I am super excited. This is going to be a great session. I hope you liked my inspiring music. The name of the song is Good Life. So I hope all of us recognize we are living the good life as we move into a fall market. And I'm excited for having 4 rock stars on this morning to share with us some of the successes they are having as they're moving through the post-NAR world. We just thought it was a great opportunity for us as a team and as a group to be sharing successes together and learning from one another. So I am thrilled to have, and I hope they will all pop on and show their fabulous faces this morning. I've got Laura Fitzpatrick from our Winnetka office on the North Shore, who's been doing great things, navigating a lot of interesting things as we move past August 17th. So welcome, Laura. There she is in her fabulous office in her brand new house that she renovated. We've got the fabulous Amanda McMillan from our Bucktown office. Really excited. Amanda's just got some stellar things to share as, again, she is really positioning herself for success moving forward into our fall market. We've got Trish Orendorf. I'm super excited to have on. What I love about Trish is not only is she a great agent, but she plays a mean air guitar and air drums at a holiday party, right, Trish? So excited to have Trish here with us. And then we've got Guido Punti from Guido, not Bucktown. Gold Coast, dang it, I almost got it perfectly right.
Sorry, Gold Coast.
Our Gold Coast office, who's also just been doing some really cool stuff as it relates to working with buyers and sellers in this post-NAR world. He's got some cool stuff to share today too, because he does a lot of colder leads. He does some Zillow stuff, so really great. And I know Amanda does that as well, but just some nice stuff, I think, to share for everyone. So I am really excited to have these 4 on with me. We also have the fabulous Kevin Rines, part of our coaching and training team. He is going to be on to support the chat. What we hope to do is kind of go through what we think are kind of 4 significant questions or themes that we have been seeing out there right now. And what we want to make sure of is, though, if there are additional questions, we're able to capture those and spend a few minutes at the end of this going through all of your questions. So we're going to get to it. I'm going to remove this screen so we can see everybody more real time. Here we all are. And we're going to get to it. So I am going to start out with kind of the first question that has been big. I know a lot of managing brokers have been getting this from agents. And so we thought only appropriate to ask this panel here. Question 1 is really, how are you handling the new conversation with sellers post-NAR? Specifically, I think explaining the decoupling concept, right? Being able to explain this to a client or a seller, and also explaining to them the way in which they should be prepared to interact with buyers and buyers agents when they request or are interested in making sure that their buyer agent is compensated. So I'm going to actually kick off with you, Amanda. I know we talked a lot about this earlier in the week, but would love to get kind of your script and how you've been approaching sort of this new norm.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I think there's a couple of basic points that are specific to this question, but specific to all of these questions to really dive into first. One of the things that I'm having a lot of success with is really just kind of starting every conversation and saying, the reality is that the end result is going to be very similar as it was before. There's just going to be some different discussions between now and then. That's trying to give some reassurance, right? The biggest thing in this, between the media and the news and everything going on, in my opinion, is a lot of confusion. So starting out each conversation saying that I think the end result is very similar to where we're starting, I think that just gets the clients, the sellers, to take a deep breath and feel okay about what we're doing. In terms of actually discussing the pieces, I keep coming back to the conversation of saying, My job as a listing agent hasn't changed. My advice to you, my counsel to you, the reason that you have me sitting in this chair talking to you is because you want to know all of the different things that are helping you to put you in the best position to end up at the finish line with the best terms possible. That hasn't changed at all. So when I come into your home and I talk about decluttering and I talk about caulking the tub and I talk about painting the bedroom, I'm also going to sit here and now talk about the commission structure. The commission structure in our world has changed. I give a little bit of a background on why it's changed. I also give a little bit of a background on when there were no buyer's agents, from that perspective, just to kind of paint that picture. But when I'm making these recommendations and I'm talking about the decoupling of the commissions, I'm trying to stay fairly surface level. I know we talked a lot in the group about not overwhelming and over talking to our clients, but explaining that now our listing agreement is going to define our relationship alone. That being said, my advice to you, if you want to hit that finish line at the numbers that we talked about, at the premium prices, the premium terms, everything like that, I am going to recommend that we are very open and willing to have discussions regarding the buyer brokerage compensation. What that means is that when we get the offers in, we're going to see not only the offer, we are going to see a request for compensation. Now, every client is coming and saying, well, what is that going to look like? What is that number going to be? And I say, well, that's kind of where we're in uncharted waters. The reality is each buyer's agent is going to have a different number with their clients. Do I think that the norms and the averages are going to fall around a certain number? Of course I do. But the reality is we're going to navigate this as we come. So we might see an offer with 2%. We might see an offer with 2.5%. Heck, we might see an offer with 3%. The reality is on our side, we shouldn't really care what that number is. We should care what our net numbers look like at the end of the day. And so that we're going to, just like we always have, really try and hone in on the fact that the bottom line is what's most important. And my advice to consider this is what's going to get you the highest number possible.
I love it. And how has the response been from sellers? Because I know you've had these conversations. Sure. And I mean, is it really feeling that it's easier than expected, that they're really kind of following your lead? What are you seeing? I mean, somebody just said in the chat, wow, she's really good, which you are really good. You make it sound so easy, but I'm sure it wasn't easy the first time. You had to kind of think about how you were going to present this to clients, right?
No, absolutely. And I'll tell anybody this, right? I'm one that practices in the mirror just like everybody else, right? I will do my scripts until I feel confident in it. And each time I have it now, I feel better and I feel better about it. But there's a couple things in it. First and foremost, I think that we're very lucky. I mean, definitely in the city and in most of the areas that we service, we live in an area with very sophisticated people. We have sophisticated sellers. We have sophisticated buyers. They understand that sometimes you spend more to make even more. So I think we're already in an advantage versus certain parts of the country where this conversation is going to be much more difficult. But I also think that it's important to know that, I mean, I haven't had any pushback at all. I've had questions, I've had understanding, and we talked about this yesterday, and I really want to get this out there. I think the best conversation that everybody needs to get comfortable with is the fact that we don't have all the answers and we don't know exactly how it's all going to play out. We're all in uncharted water. So for me, that's hey, I don't have all the answers right now. I wish I did. Trust me, I'm type A as they come, and I wish I did, but I don't have every answer right now because we are in uncharted waters. But I can tell you over the last 23 years, I've had a lot of uncharted waters, and I can tell you we've navigated as professionally and as well as we can, and we always come out on top. So you have to find a way to get okay with not knowing exactly what it's going to look like, because your confidence in that is going to be their confidence in that.
Yeah, because the reality is you do know more than they do. Well, you don't have all the answers, you're further along than the client is. And so, they're going to follow that lead from you with that confidence, which I absolutely love. So I want to kind of pivot to Laura and kind of get your sense or take on how are you handling these conversations with sellers? And while, sellers and buyers are very similar in a lot of ways, we also know there are different nuances depending on where we operate in the market. So Amanda, you're in the city. I feel like you're kind of right in your stride and have created your script. I know Laura, you're in the North Shore markets in Winnetka, New Trier, those surrounding areas. And I know that, these conversations, I know there was a little bit of almost even a sticking point with other agents about the fear of, kind of almost protecting buyer compensation, so how have these conversations been with your sellers? Again, when you're sort of explaining, especially this decoupling concept, what has worked for you, or what have you seen?
So I agree with Amanda. We are so fortunate to have sellers who this may not be their first time selling. They're used to a traditional model where we charged 5 or 6%. And what's great too in the media, when they keep talking about this, they keep talking about you used to pay 5 or 6%, which supports us all when we really try to go for that getting what you're worth and your 6%. So just really breaking it down for them to, okay, you used to pay 6%, 5%, and it was always negotiable. Now you're paying your listing side fee, and then there's a good chance that based on the offer, you should expect to pay somewhere between 2.5%, 3%, and more. Sellers recognize that however they break it down, they're paying for it. So their bottom line, their net number will suffer. Whether they don't want to pay a buyer's agent, then now a buyer's going to pay less for their home because now they have to pay their agent, or we're packaging it in the sales price and they're offering a compensation. So, we've been fortunate to have a very strong market. We're seeing so many multiple offers. We're seeing sellers who have nice cushion, nice amount of equity in their home. We're not, at the point where, people are distressed and, they're bringing money to closing like they might have back in the day. So they recognize that in order to continue to keep the market strong, to support buyers agents, to get those multiple offers, they need to cooperate. But I think the biggest change is that they have a choice and they can, decide up front. We can wait and see on the offers. They can even agree to disclose it up front. And I think it just sets the tone for a nice, transaction relationship going forward.
Yeah, and I think what I like about this too is we're sort of transitioning to, Amanda had said this, we're kind of transitioning our sellers to the idea of like, let's not get hung up on sort of some of these numbers, because at the end of the day, this is about what is your take home? What is your net going to be? And, if compensation is requested through the part of negotiating the terms of the contract, the seller has some control. Like they can say, I'm happy to pay this, but this is the price in which I feel comfortable with all of these terms to get this done, right? So it just becomes, we're shifting it from something that's sort of predetermined into the components of negotiating the actual contract terms. And Amanda, you had your hand up, so I didn't know if you had something to add.
Yeah, and I think Laura kind of hit it on that, and she had a really important note that I think we all have to be very aware of. This dialogue and this conversation is going to change a lot depending on the market we're in. What we're talking about and dealing with right now is going to evolve into something different when we hit the beginning of next year and our market dynamic changes from Q3, in a presidential election year to,
Sure.
Q1 in a market where we all know we're not going to have enough inventory. And I think that's where it comes back to understanding all the pieces so that we're really, really comfortable. So I think we're lucky that we're starting right now so that we can really hit our strides, but also knowing in the back of our heads, we have to be able to flow with this, because I think the dialogue's really going to change.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's this new normal, and we're going to have to see how some of this new normal is going to adjust, to your point, Amanda, as the markets change, right? As the dynamics change, as the sort of power play also shifts between seller and buyer. Like that's going to be really different. The conversations and maybe how sellers are going to have to even be more aggressive at some point when a market shifts and buyers suddenly have a little bit more control. So really interesting, but I agree. And I like that you talk with your clients about the fact that it's a learning opportunity, and we're all trying to kind of figure this out, So
Yeah,
I want
I might
Yeah,
want
go
to
ahead,
add to
Guido.
that real quick too on the seller side. I think it's also, I mean, we're fortunate that App Properties trained us very well. We've had a lot of information about this, but I think it's also important to have a conversation when you get that contract too, because I'm running into agents that really don't have a grasp on this. And when the offers are coming in, I'm kind of confused as to what they're asking, why they're asking, where's the compensation? So I think it's also important that we hop on the call, you know, when we're representing a seller and we have a contract come in, and just make sure we understand, you know, that this agent and how they're presenting it, and what their take on this is, and how they're you know, willing to get the compensation and things like that too, because not all of them know what's going on. So
Agreed, agreed. And I think Mike and Thad sent a video out last week where we talked about having patience, because I think as a team, we have done a really good job collectively of trying to be really prepared in the marketplace. And there are others, Guido, to your point, who are still trying to figure it out. So being kind and maybe even being helpful to our colleagues, you know, at other firms, just to your point, Guido, make sure that what they're asking, you know, that you have a clear understanding so that the negotiations go smoothly and they're put in a good position, you are, and everybody is kind of collectively, which I think is super important. So on that note, I want to switch to or shift to the discussions about unrepresented buyers and dual agency. You know, this is obviously a conversation that we have in the listing agreement when we are talking with sellers. And Guido, I wanted to hear a little bit more from you as to how are you talking with your sellers about this? Because it's obviously a piece of, you know, what we talk about whenever we're talking with them, right? There's a
Sure.
good chance that a buyer will have representation, but in the event they don't, kind of how are you teeing this up and how are you getting sellers comfortable around that language?
Yeah, so when I go through the listing agreement, and again, I try not to get, my approach to a lot of this is try not to get too deep into the weeds with it. And like my listing agreements, for example, I don't go line by line with them. We talk about certain points. I send it over to them. I don't bring a copy with me when I go to my listing agreement. I tell them I'll follow up with it. I used to go through it line by line years ago, and it just created more questions, more uncertainty. But now I let them review it, go through it, and then, you know, sign it in DocuSign. But when we go over the part about or they have questions about, you know, dual agency and unrepresented buyers, you know, first of all, I explain and make sure they understand, you know, they know what that means, or we have a good understanding of the definition of what that is. But I also let them know, like, if they check the box, yes, they're open to it. Like, it's not the end all be all. Like, there are other documents if we come across this situation, which is probably going to be rare. But if we do, there are other documents that we have to go over. And I only have half the story. Like, I have, you know, Mr. Seller, I have your side of the story and how you feel. You know, I don't know how this unrepresented buyer is going to feel about this either. So, you know, both of you are going to have to agree to this, you know, in the beginning as well. And, you know, I explained, like, these people might come from open houses. They might feel comfortable, you know, working with the agent because they think there's less communication going on, or they don't have a relationship with an agent. And we want to try to capture that offer as quickly as we can. So, you know, again, I don't get super deep into the weeds with it. I do address it though once we come across that, and I do a handful of those every year. I know a lot of agents say, you know, you shouldn't do that. And I also offer them the option of, you know, working with somebody else from my office or maybe somebody on my team. However, if you do have a team and you work with somebody on your team, those dual agency agreements still need to be signed. So.
Yep. Yeah, no, super important. And I love that. That segues very nicely into Amanda, who I know I want kind of your take, because you have a nice script when it comes to talking about, you know, when there's a scenario of an unrepresented buyer and the option sort of for dual agency. And so I'd love kind of your take, because you do have team members and you kind of handle this a really specific way.
No, absolutely. You know, dual agency is something that I explain to my sellers, and realistically, I have a similar conversation with buyers in this environment, but I explain to the sellers is this: dual agency is something that is totally permissible, but obviously it raises some questions. In theory, you know, I always explain, kind of like Guido does, what the basic version of dual agency is. I then have to add a layer of complexity to it to explain what it means within having a team, so that even though I may have never even met somebody before, somebody on a Teams buyer, it could still create that situation. You know, I give them my thoughts on dual agency, and my thoughts are this: What I don't like about dual agency is I feel like I lose my ability to advise. And I like to think that the reason that I am sitting there with those clients is because they want my advice, my counsel, and everything else. But I also then let them know I don't like to be the reason that a good buyer and a good seller come together either. So in this predicament, usually what I suggest, if they're open to it, obviously letting them know if they have no interest in that, but I explain to them that if this is something that they're open to, and we don't see it very often in our marketplace, but if it is something they're open to, usually what I suggest so that we can all kind of get what we need out of it is that I would stay with the sellers. The buyers would then go with one of the team members. We would have a last discussion and I would literally stop communicating and they would agree to it and they would know this as well. So that then we remove kind of some of the things about dual agency that don't feel as good. I can advise to my heart's content. The other agent could give good advice to their heart's content, and we could still make it to the finish line. Now it's still technically a dual agency because of the structure, but we remove kind of the negative elements. Now I know not everyone has a team and has the ability to do that, but I think that everyone has the ability to have another agent that they really think is great to have that relationship with, to kind of say, hey, look, will you be my dual agency partner? You know, in the sense that I get into this, I'd like to offer this to my sellers to see if that's the case. You know, if that's the case, would you be happy to come in and step in and work through this transaction with me? But it's one that most sellers, I would say, when they hear it that way, they say, you know what, you're right. Like Guido, I also explain, this is just a scratching the surface. This is just saying, hey, you're okay with the concept and the idea of it. As we navigate it, we're not going to show it without you knowing that it would create a dual agency situation. We're not going to kind of navigate into any of those waters, and there will be a lot more discussions at that point. At this point, we just want to know, is it something that you're okay with or you're totally averse to?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's a great kind of level setting, nice first conversation to get them comfortable. But, you know, we were talking about it, Guido, I think earlier this morning before we started, like every situation is different. And, you know, letting them know that I think the most important thing is that you're on their side. And when the time comes and a situation presents itself, we're going to work together to make sure you feel comfortable moving forward. But just really great language. I feel like hopefully a lot of you in the audience right now are just eating up a lot of these little nuggets and talking points because I think they're great. All right, I want to shift a little bit into conversation about buyers right now in kind of this new world of an exclusive buyer broker agreement. And Trish, I am going to have you kind of kick off on this topic and want to get your sense on how are you handling these new conversations, right, with our buyers, and you know, now prompting them with the fact that we are required to have an exclusive buyer broker agreement signed before we can show them properties, and then also talking to them quite candidly about the possibilities of your compensation and how that's going to be handled. I know you've already kind of hit the ground running and you know, are already getting pretty comfortable with it. So I'd love your thoughts and your perspective.
Well, what we have to understand is that we're not really talking to people that are in our brain, right? These people typically have not really known about the NAR settlement or anything. So keeping it simple, not over explaining, and just kind of adding your value to the situation, I think is the most important. So for instance, when you're asking for the compensation, you know, I usually show them that one sheet that we have in every office. Look, we're going to ask the seller to pay it. You may pay it, or it can be kind of a combination of both of you paying it. In a competitive situation, though, it's going to become kind of difficult to get a seller, especially, or a buyer rather, especially somebody that doesn't have the commissions or the liquidity to pay us directly. So
Sure.
I would suggest that how you show your added value is by saying something like, never before has it been more important to have a great relationship with your lender, because a couple of things are going to happen. If I can have a conversation prior to making an offer, I'm going to be able to figure out a way to help you become super competitive with your offer. So if it's a multiple offer situation, I can talk to the lender and say, hey, let's take a look at their finances. Is it, you know, okay? Or would you recommend that instead of putting 20% down, they put down 17.5%. That way we get the 2.5% commission for myself. And then they could take out mortgage insurance. I think what most people or most agents don't understand, on a $500,000 loan, it's only like $30 a month, right? So and then as soon as they get the assets to go back to that 20%, then they're not paying it anymore. So that's a great way. And explaining things like that they would have no clue about how to go about doing something like that, kind of is your value add, right? You're saying, I'm going to have a great relationship with the lender. I'm talking to maybe Leo at, Proper, and we're trying to figure out a way. We're going to act as a team. That way that they get excited about the fact that they can work with you and they're going to be part of this great team. So that's kind of how I go about it. And then, there's also other ways, can we go over list a little bit, mortgage a little bit more, so that we can have the seller feel comfortable about paying me the commissions if they're unwilling. But now they may, because, we're offering a great deal.
Yeah. What I love about what you just said, all of this is, to me, if I were a buyer, you're saying things as if, which you do know what you're doing, but as if this is something you've been doing all the time, and that this is just my game plan. Like, this is my team. This is how we work to give you the competitive advantage. And I will say, there are a lot of lenders out there. And I think one of the advantages, or the things we're really trying to do, especially with our proper rate loan officers, is to give all of you agents that ability to say, I'm going to meet with them ahead of time and start figuring out, what do I say? What is my strategy? So when I do have a buyer, especially, I think the biggest thing people are nervous about are those competitive situations, right? Where it does have to restructure and it doesn't become a perspective that the seller maybe is paying the compensation. So I love. And what has been the response? I mean, have you had, clients that you've talked to about it, and does it immediately get them comfortable? Are they willing to kind of move forward and sign? What have you seen?
Yep. I don't think there's one buyer that I've had in the past 2 weeks that has been like, oh my gosh, like, where am I going to find the money? If you can kind of explain that to them, that you're going to have a relationship, they get so excited because they've heard some of the news and they can't really grasp it, but they get so excited that there's somebody, boots on the ground, that has their back.
Yeah.
And then the fact that I'll just add something in there and going, in fact, we are going to get, Leo or Mike or somebody to, when we submit that offer, they are going to call that seller's agent directly as I press the button and send, to say, that your finances are intact, you're a great buyer. And I actually won a deal like that a couple weeks prior to all of this, because Leo called somebody and had a conversation, and they're like, you're the only agent that had the lender call me. So I didn't have to go through the paperwork, find out who the lender was. You take out that step for the seller's agent, and they just feel more comfortable. You feel more comfortable. The buyer feels more comfortable. And it's just kind of like, okay, everybody, let's just push down. It's not that excitable, and it just becomes just seamless. And, I think that confidence in showing that you're a team, you're excited, and you're kind of using that movement in your eyes. And then you can also piggyback with all the other added value things, right? You're talking about, I stage, my photography, all those other things. I'm a great negotiator, I think, but saying your worth and how you're going to be a team and how you're going to get this done financially will be a better conversation going forward.
I love it.
And to add
I
on,
love that fact, because to me, it shows how organized you are too, that your team immediately, you hit send and bam, your lender's calling. So it also is showing them, this is going to be a great, if they're this organized now, this is going to be a great, this is going to be a great process if we pick them.
and
We
to
don't
add
have
on to Trish's thing real quick, I do find a lot of the buyers, after you have that discussion with them, feel a lot more relaxed because they're hearing all of the wrong things out there. So there's a bigger sense of comfort with them too. And I think it's important, like, not to lead with this when you talk to a new buyer either. Like, go through your regular sales pitch, go through your spiel, send out, your buyer thing. But I wouldn't lead with, the settlement issue. I go through my, like I normally do with any other buyer before all of this happened. And then towards the end, I asked them if they're aware of, the NAR settlement. And again, majority of them are not. So I know how far to go into the weeds. And me and Alexa work with a lot of Zillow clients, so brand new clients. And I've had 4 brand new clients since this, among others that I have signed. And all of them signed it after you kind of walk them through it a little bit. I am doing 30 days with them because they're a little uncomfortable with 1 year. Everybody else with me has signed a year with no pushback. And after that, I kind of remind them, if we're doing it for a week or for a day, like when that contract expires, I expire. My searches expire. My running, what I do in the background expires. You shooting me questions one night because you're on the internet and you find this property, like it covers everything I do for you. And to make them feel a little more relaxed, I tell them, look, this is an agreement between me and you. So if the phone rings one day and you have that, hey Guido, this is not working out conversation, then I'm not here to trap you into an agreement. I'm here to build a relationship. I'm here to help you find the house that you want. I'm not here to sign, but now we have to have this thing signed. So I think that eases them. I haven't had that come to Guido conversation yet with anybody.
Yeah.
But I think it's just an approach. But see what maybe they know first about it before you get too deep in the weeds with everything.
And one quick question, Guido, because Amanda, I know you've got a response to this question as well, but to just share with people, because I know Zillow has like a showing
Yep.
agreement that can be signed. And what you've done is you've really sort of bypassed that. And in lieu of having them sign that, you've just sent over your exclusive buyer broker agreement, right? So I think for people who are
Correct.
out there getting cold leads or people that they don't really know, especially on Zillow, I'd love for you just to
Yeah.
say how you do that.
So basically when the Zillow call comes in, we have a very brief time to capture it. So what we try to do first is capture the appointment and set the appointment with them. And then we always ask, are you currently working with an agent? Have you signed a buyer broker agreement, or are you kind of looking on your own? And when they're looking on their own, that's when I go into ask them about the NAR settlement. Have you heard about this? Well, no, I haven't. Okay, so let's not go too far with this. But Zillow, when we hang up that call, Zillow has the option for us to send them the 7-day non-exclusive buyer broker agreement. So at the beginning, I was using that and I'm like, well, wait a minute here. If they've never heard about it, let me just go into my spiel with mine. And then I let them know I'm sending something from DocuSign. So, anybody working with Zillow out there, I would just skip sending the buyer broker agreement that Zillow has, because it's terrible. And it's only for 7 days and it's non-exclusive. So they can sign 20 of those. And then I just kind of go into my thing with them. And again, I let them know 30 days, let's do 30 days. Let's kick the tires of each other, see how we work together. And then we'll kind of go on from there. Of the 4 that signed the 30 days, I already had 2 of them signed for a year before it even expired. So
That's awesome. I love it. Amanda, I know you had something to add, so I didn't want to not
No,
circle
all
back.
good. There's 2 little points off of what you guys said, because I think it's such good content. First and foremost, how do you work that into your buyers conversation? That was something that I really thought long and hard on during my buyers presentations. I always, for me, what was really natural and what's worked really well is I kind of joke and say, I exhaust my clients with my knowledge of the market. There's a point in which I say, hey, let me tell you what's going on in the market so that you can kind of understand high level. Realistically, it's really just a time for me to show off a little bit. And I kind of backtrack a little bit, talk about some of the impacts of COVID, where the market's been, where we've seen success, where we don't. And then obviously it's really natural to just transition into this new phase, right? You're kind of chronologically talking about the market and where we're at. It's a really nice place to say, hey, here's something that we're seeing and dealing with now. And then I agree with Guido 100%. There's a fine line of how you want to put that information out there. You do not want to over talk it. You want to give them enough. And that's kind of where I've gotten really comfortable with the fact of, right, the end result is similar. The path there is slightly different, right? The conversations. The other thing that I think is really important, kind of off of something that Trish said, is I think it's important to understand what I've seen so far is the buyers have different reactions kind of depending on where they're at in their life process, right? The first time buyers that are coming to us that are spending $250,000, they have a lot more anxiousness about it than somebody that's bought a few times, and it's important to make sure your conversation really suits that. And that's where I'm kind of saying to my buyers that the dialogue that I'm using is saying, once again, the end result isn't going to be different than before. It's just this conversation, because one of two things is most likely going to happen. Number one, the seller is going to be advised well from their agency to offer something to work with us. If they're one of the small percentage that's not, your lender is going to be skilled enough to embed this into your mortgage, and our offer is going to reflect that change. So once again, that's the same result. The other thing that I've had some success with recently, and I don't know how many people are working with investors, especially cash investors. I have been advising them that I think that there's a strategy to be run by their tax professionals, not by me, in which they remove the commission completely from the transaction, pay cash with no commission. Then we essentially at Properties invoices them for the commission, because now they have an expense. They have a lower purchase price, a lower tax basis, and they have an expense in their investment as well.
Mhm. Love it. Love it. Great ideas. Look at these new things that are already emerging in light of our
So
changes.
exciting.
All right, so now I want to wrap with our fourth question before we open it up to everybody else. And I think this is a big one. And I think, Guido, you kind of even touched on this just a little bit, which is how are we handling conversations with other agents regarding compensation? And I will say, I feel like when we're doing things that are at, I feel like everyone is really kind of on the same page. Good conversations are happening. But, I think one of the big things we are kind of hearing is that different brokerages are, different agents are getting up to speed at different times, right? And so making sure that when we are working with our sellers, we are having these good conversations. For example, I know that we are seeing in some of these markets where agents are wanting to sign a broker to broker agreement, which really solidifies almost upfront what the seller might be offering as compensation to a buyer's agent. I think we collectively as a company have really felt that the smartest thing to do is to talk with our seller and obviously make them aware that the buyer and the buyer's agent will likely request that their agent's compensation be paid through the transaction. And so we, I think collectively have really wanted to encourage that it happens during that process. But, I wanted just to kind of see what's happening boots on the ground as you are doing transactions. And I want to open this to Laura and to Trish, because I know that you've been working both on the listing side and on the buyer side. But what are you seeing right now with the conversations that you're having with agents on compensation?
I think frankly, it's been all over the board. I was at one of my listings and I had a broker tour and they were asking me, oh, so how are you guys saying it? What is at saying? And I said, well, you make it as part of the offer and, so you're not going to tell people? I'm like, there's nothing to tell. And they're like, oh, is that how you're going to not tell anybody what's going on? I'm like, no, actually the Department of Justice is asking us to uncouple these things. So you as the buyer's agent could make that a part of your offer, but my job is to negotiate my commission. Your job is to negotiate your commission, and how that comes together will be part of the negotiations. It's not that big of a deal. And I think, acting kind and acting like trying not to we're so smart or make them feel diminished is really the message that we want to send. Not that we know more and we're kind of, jumping over. The message is in the industry and that, hey, let's help each other out. Let's all try to understand this at the same time because it's going to be the best for everybody. And I think that conversation is the best way to go about.
Yeah.
But
and I think every day, every week, we're getting further along, right? I mean, I'm already hearing the difference in strides of people figuring it out. And I think we have to be appreciative. Like everyone's just a little nervous, right? This is our livelihood. And we just, and the thing that is tough is, look, the Department of Justice clearly said that they wanted us to decouple. The other thing that we cannot do is we cannot conspire. We cannot all talk about compensation in a room together and say, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing this, right? So it does make it almost a little bit difficult to get there, because you're almost having to learn through the process of the transaction to figure out, this is how Trish tends to work with her sellers. You know, the next deal that they do with you, Trish, they're probably going to know, odds are, she's talked to her seller about the fact that compensation
Correct.
for the buyer's agent is going to be something that gets negotiated. So now I know when I'm presenting an offer with her, I'm just going to put it through the term as an addendum to the purchase contract, right? So it's just going to take
Yeah.
a little bit of time. And I love and really appreciate that you say it isn't about us doing it better, right? Like we've just sort of decided as a company, kind of how we want our philosophy on approaching this and trying to stay in line with what the settlement, you know, the spirit of the settlement, but really giving some grace to people because we're all at different spots in figuring it out. So I love that. Laura, what are you,
And-
you know, because I
Sorry.
think
One
that's,
other thing
oh, sure. Sorry,
on the
Trish.
listing side too, when we're talking about this, you know, because there's a lot of people in the field that are saying, well, we're still doing 2.5, and that's what we're telling our sellers. When you're in a competitive listing situation, to be able to say to your seller, you know, oh, well, so-and-so told me to give the 2.5%. I'm like, well, why would I give your money away? Let them ask for your money.
Yeah.
You know, that is so powerful. And I feel like the seller has kind of an ability to trust you a little bit more and be
Yeah.
confident in your services.
Because you're
So-
saying, let's just see what we get first.
Let's just see.
And then we can respond, right? And I will say, I just talked to an agent last week who had 3 offers in a situation, and they're all different terms, but there was a request for 2.5% for the buyer's agent, 2% for the buyer's agent, and 1.5% for the buyer's agent.
Right.
They ended up going with the offer where the request for agent compensation was 2.5%, because the package collectively, the price,
Correct.
the terms were most advantageous to the seller. So that's the other thing that we need to recognize is it's about everything when a seller's looking at it, and not always to get so hung up on that
Yeah,
piece.
I would like to mention one deal that I worked on. My buyer broker agreements, I use the 3%.
Mhm.
And when I submit the addendum to the offer, I put 3%. So far, I got 3% that came back fine. And one agent called me and said, you know, I really thought your client, I really thought we were going to get pushback on your addendum for your compensation, but my client felt that your offer was so strong and so well put together that when I did the net sheets, like it was still within his range. So don't be afraid to put 3% on there. I mean, you know, this change can also help us make some more money as well. And you know what? If they push back to 2.5%, which some of them do, like it's no big deal. Like you're back to 2.5%. You know, you go on about your day. But you know, I did get two to agree to pay me 3. So
Yeah. I love that. I love that because this is the idea of, you know, this is the first time now also where as buyer's agents, we are not being told what our value is based off of what a seller predetermines or what a listing agent predetermines, right? Guido, to your point, you know your value and you know what you're going to be requesting for the experience that you're presenting to your client. So I love that. And this is the art of where we're headed, which is so exciting. Laura, before we kind of open up to the audience, I do though want your take on, you know, just the conversations that you're seeing with agents related to compensation. Anything kind of to add or that you're seeing to share?
Yeah, I think we all have to just remember, like, we're all learning this. This is kind of just very fluid right now. And sometimes us agents tend to trip over ourselves. We get in our own way, we overcomplicate things, we overthink things, and, you know, we can just analyze it forever. So, you know, I think the key to remember is that all commissions are negotiable, whether it's, you know, the listing side, the buying side, you know, we're going to do our best for our clients to get them the house. These buyers are stressed, there's no inventory, the rates are high, they're in competitive situations. So, you know, I agree that, you know, it's not just the commission, it's the total package. I mean, many times a seller will pick an offer not because it's the highest price, but maybe it's as is or it's cash or you know there's a short attorney review period. So I think, you know, we know our own value. You just have to ask for it. If you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. So it is negotiable. A listing agent and a seller can come back and, you know, respond, we like your offer, but we're willing to pay X in commission, and then that's a conversation between you and your buyer, how you're gonna handle the difference and how you're gonna make it up. So, I think, what, personally has been a little bit confusing is the, broker to broker agreements versus the, agreements that a seller may have already agreed to, because there used to be that $4.95 MLS fee, which now seems to have, in theory, gone away, but brokerages are trying to, I think, figure out a way to capture that again. And I think those broker to broker agreements could get us kind of trapped in that our buyers have to pay a $4.95 or whatever the fee is, and now we have to pay a fee to the listing brokerage. And so I think we just have to be careful to really, review and make it between truly the brokerages and not, broker to broker.
Yeah. And the thing is that, I think the goal too is the more that you can get all of the terms through the actual transaction, the purchase agreement itself, and removing, these broker to broker agreements as kind of something additional or to the side, I think will, be able to allow you to manage that a little bit more. But I think it goes back to everybody allowing some grace, because we as a company have, tried to be as thoughtful as we can on this and have made decisions and have tried to put everybody within App Properties in a really solid position. But again, kind of as we are all seeing real time and as you're seeing things play out real time, other agents, other firms, everyone's trying to figure this out. So there is going to be kind of this period of grace as we move to what we hope is some sort of a new normal, I think, in all of this. But, I think the biggest thing that I love here is our opportunity to share as, agents, as colleagues, as you're having real-time experiences of how you've solved for things. I think what we want to try to do is to continue bringing that, to light as much as possible to the agent community, because we're all right now really learning from one another. So I loved all of this. I want to kind of shift to Kevin right now, who's sitting across from me, who's going to maybe just share with me, and I can maybe go on mute and silent if you want to buzz through some of the questions and, just maybe throw out to whomever who might be able to answer these. I think that would be valuable.
All right, perfect.
Hold on.
Okay, perfect. All right, let me see here. One of the big questions that came up, so we were talking about things, it was not necessarily predetermining what the co-op amount was in the listing agreements. And so I think there's a little bit of angst with that with a lot of brokers. So if you can go into, maybe Amanda, you go into a little bit of detail on how you have the conversation about the co-op with them, and then ultimately what your script is when you're getting phone calls from brokers on the other side asking what that buyer's agent compensation is.
Absolutely. Well, I do kind of a blend of a lot of different things in that conversation. Obviously, I talk about it. I talk about the expectation. I talk about the fact that we're not going to actually know what each request is going to look like, but I try and prepare them. Now, personally, right now, I am using the rider to the listing agreement because I think this just gets mentally people more committed to the idea of it. Now, I slightly edited and added one word to it where it talks about what they're offering. I just added, well, I should say 2 words, up to. So once again, I'm kind of using that idea that the majority of what I think we're going to see, I don't know, but I think we're going to see is probably close to that 2.5%. We're not allowed to have an industry standard, but if we ever did, we don't. But if we ever did, that's what it would look like. So I'm using that once again, just to get them comfortable with that idea. But then I'm also explaining there may be requests for more. Once again, I could care less what the request is for. I care where the numbers come in at and whether or not that's going to help us get to where we need to be. So that's really how I'm kind of putting it forth and working it into those conversations. When agents are reaching out to me, and this has been relatively plentiful in the city, I haven't seen anybody ask me to sign an agreement, but I do get a lot of requests via email. What's your compensation? What are you offering? What is this? My response is very simple. I'm just basically saying that the sellers are expecting and open to discussions on buyer agency compensation. Plain and simple. I'm not kind of putting them any numbers. I'm just saying that they're expecting and open to those discussions, which in my opinion says, write me an offer. And I think we talked a lot about this in the group. I think that this whole calling and asking and what are you offering, to me, it's overcomplicating it. right? With my buyers, I'm not, and I'm showing something, I'm not asking, I'm just putting the offers out there from that perspective. Now, I know that there's a bunch of questions, and this might transition into the next one about multiple bids. Like, I think that that's going to be obviously a little bit of an uncharted waters. I think the buyer's agency commission is going to be part of something that's used to make things more competitive, especially when we get into spring market. But that's where I think the dialogue is going to change a little bit as we navigate through this. But the good news is right, as successful buyer's agents, we're always looking for ways to make ourselves more desirable to the seller. We just got another tool that we can work with, and it's not just coming out of our buyer's pocket. There's ways to navigate through there.
I do the same thing pretty much Amanda does. I just let them know that my seller is, open to reviewing offers with buyer's compensation, and I have educated my seller, on what to expect. But I don't get into the weeds like what we signed or how much it is. Like Amanda said, give me an offer and we'll take it from there and put your compensation into it.
All right, has any of you had brokers when they were making these appointments push back on you that if you're not going to give them a defined number on compensation, they were going to cancel the showing agreement? That came up in the chat. I've heard it from other brokers. Is anybody experiencing that?
Nope.
No?
No.
Okay, excellent. All right, perfect. Let's jump to the next question. I had a question in here. Are any of the panelists able to share an example of where buyers were reluctant to sign on the exclusive buyer broker agreement? Are you getting pushback on any specific language in there?
So I get pushback once in a while on the compensation amount because I put 3%, and I think I saw that question go out. Somebody asked me, yeah, I put 3%. I use the 3% agreement for all of mine, but I let them know that, prior to these agreements, sometimes on the MLS, sellers would be offering bonuses to the agents for certain things. I said, basically what this allows me to get is that additional bonus if there is one. A couple people have asked me, could we move it to 2%? I signed one at 2%, and we're under contract, and the seller's paying 4%. So, you never know, what they're doing on the other side as well. And then the other one is sometimes on the term. And then I had one client that wanted to strike a bunch of stuff. So my response to that is, don't get uptight about it. Don't stress about it. Just strike out what you want, send it to me. I'll send it to my managing broker. They'll review it. And I would say they struck out about half of the contract, and I sent it in, and they went through it, and they, at properties agreed to everything that he wanted to strike. So, don't be afraid if they get a little savvy with it. And this client was an attorney. And I was honest with her. I said, some of this stuff and these attorney questions you're asking me, I don't understand, but you know what? I'm going to find out the answers for you, and we'll get to the bottom of it. And she signed. So
excellent. All right. Another one would be, the question was, can the panelists share more of what they're seeing in terms of multiple offers? Are they coming in mostly with addendums? Are they coming in with agents' compensation? Are they concessions? Can you share in a competitive market with multiple offers? What are you seeing buyers agents writing in regarding compensation?
I personally, out in the western suburbs, just because we've had a little bit of a lull, I haven't seen a super competitive, we're having, last month or 3 months ago, 7, 8, 9, 10 offers on a home. I don't think we're there yet. I think it's, the fall, everybody's kind of away now. It's going to start to ramp up again, but having your buyer all queued up to anticipate that, and having that conversation when you do get to the buyer's agreement, I think is just a way to package your value added situation to them. And I think they appreciate that. I haven't had any pushbacks from buyers to getting the agreement signed. And typically what they've said is, well, of course we want you to get paid. You deserve to get paid, right? And I think that's what's going to happen as we start to decouple more and more. People are going to understand, oh no, I'm paying for this person and you're paying for that person. And that's kind of the way it should be. So that's what's happening out in the western suburbs.
I'll just jump in on that. I think that, and this was a little bit of what I was alluding to before. I think the conversation right now is going to evolve, but I also think one thing that's really important is knowing that some of our buyers right now will most likely be buyers in the spring too. So it's kind of setting up the longer term conversations. You know, for me, I'm looking at it as an advantage. I'm explaining to them that, you know, right now everything's going to get embedded. If we do get into a competitive situation, this is just one more negotiation wedge that we have. I think it's also important that if you're not fully aligned with your top lenders on the conversations they're having as well, then you're doing yourself and your clients a disservice. So that all my clients, when they're going through the pre-approval, they're kind of understanding, hey, if it's something that we need to negotiate separately, if we want to go in and say, hey, we're not going to ask for any compensation for our agent in here, but then we're going to have our lender added on afterwards into the loan, they need to understand the differential of how that looks, because realistically, it's not that different other than just raising the purchase price. So now there might be some advantages of keeping the purchase price lower. We all know there's some advantages of that. So in my opinion, explaining to them that we have one more tool to make us competitive is going to be how that conversation really evolves as we go through this. But, you know, it's the hardest piece. I've been in a couple of multiple bids since then, and it's the conversation of explaining to the buyer, we don't know what we're going up against. And it doesn't matter if we're saying, oh, is it the agent commission that's different? Are they taking 2% or 3% and we're doing this? Or is it, we don't know what their price is or their terms are, or if they're giving a free rent back? It's kind of understanding that there's a lot of unknowns in a multiple bid. We can't control that. We'll drive ourselves crazy. We just need to be really, really confident in the terms that we set forth. And if it's our day, our win, then great. If somebody else needs to throw a Hail Mary because of their situation, you know what? There's a better house out there for us.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, we got time for probably one more question. The question is, and it's come up a few different times, how have you managed the conversation with your buyers, the $495 fee? You guys have any good scripts that you can share with the group on how we're collecting or talking about that $495 on the buy side?
I haven't had an opportunity to have a closing come up where we could add it onto the settlement statement, but my buyers know that at a minimum, they're gonna have to pay this $495 fee, and it's like a processing fee or any other admin fee in any other business. It's just the cost of doing business, and it goes to App Properties. It doesn't go to me. It's, you know, their processing fee.
I explained to them a little bit that, you know, the fees, they're no longer on the MLS. So we're basically taking these fees and we have to document them somewhere else. So we're moving them over to the contract and to the offer. Because I've had a handful of agents and I had a conversation with Rick and Rachel about this, but, you know, halfway through the deal, they send me over a text. Oh, don't forget that it's, you know, we agreed to your 3% minus $495. And my question was, you know, I don't think they can just go ahead and do that because, you know, that's what this whole lawsuit is about. Now you're telling me and structuring what the commission is. You're making a change to it. Although it's $495, you're still kind of just arbitrarily making a change. So I've had a lot of agents, you know, remind me after we're under contract that they're taking $495 out of that. And I'm like, nah, I don't think so.
All right, we had to do some sound shifting because we're in the same room. Yeah, you know, and I think that these are the things that are going to be the work in progress. And what I will say to wrap, because I know Amanda's got to jump, she's got a sharp 10 and it's 10:01. But first I want to say, please, in the shout or in the chat, thank these four for being on this morning with us, because while I know there were a ton more questions to be answered, we will take a look and do our best as a coaching and training group to maybe follow up on some of these things that we couldn't get to today. But what a great group, what great golden nuggets we got from the four of these awesome individuals. I appreciate their time. Amanda, if you need to go, just jump. But I just want to thank all of you that were on. I know many of you said that you're going to listen to this again because we did record it. We'll try to get it out either this afternoon or first thing tomorrow. But keep the questions coming. Our whole goal is to continue to do things like this, have these panels, have opportunities on our Monday all calls, which are coming up starting next week, to continue sharing with one another, to educate and make sure that we all are feeling great moving forward. So for those of you on, Laura, Guido, Trish, thanks for joining us. Kevin, thanks for manning the chat as always. And to all of you, make it an awesome Thursday. Thursday, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. All right?
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.